The evolution of the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, as a religious figure has been a complex and multifaceted process spanning over 2,000 years. Her image and role in Christianity have changed significantly over time, reflecting the cultural and historical context in which she has been venerated. As both a perpetual virgin and a perfect mother, Mary represents an impossible ideal. Centuries of Christian tradition have transformed the poor peasant girl from Nazareth into the embodiment of feminine obedience and purity, the Queen of Heaven, even the Mother of God. But what do we know about the real Mary, the young Jewish woman who gave birth to Jesus so many years ago? Before we dive into this intriguing history, just a quick reminder that if you're interested in early access to videos and live chats with the creator of Intrigued Mind, consider subscribing to our Patreon. Your support will greatly help us keep the channel producing more intriguing content. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. So who was the Virgin Mary? There can be little doubt that Mary existed. Her son, Jesus, is referred to by several disinterested Roman sources, and few today would doubt that he too existed. If Jesus existed, then so too did his mother. We can also be fairly sure of her name. The Gospels give her name in Greek as Maria, but she would have been known at home by the common Jewish name Miriam or Mariame. Like other women of her day, Mary would have been married around the age of 13, at the onset of puberty. The marriage would have been arranged by her parents, normally to an older man. A year or so after betrothal, they would have been married. At that point, we believe Mary left her family home to move in with Joseph. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke maintain that Mary was pregnant before she moved into Joseph's house. Given the Gospels were written decades after Jesus' death, in all probability, neither author had any reliable historical sources to corroborate this, nor any of Mary's personal history either. However, both Gospels wanted to make a theological point. Both writers used the virginal conception as a metaphor to express their deep conviction that the father of Jesus was none other than God himself. Neither Gospel goes into much further detail about Mary herself. As such, in the early days of Christianity, the Virgin Mary was not a central figure. She is mentioned briefly in the New Testament, but her role in the life and ministry of Jesus and the early church is not well defined. However, as Christianity began to spread and take root in various cultures, Mary began to take on a more prominent role. Once it embarked along this path, Christian tradition evolved quickly. As early as the 2nd century, the virginal conception had been expanded in some circles into a belief in Mary's perpetual virginity and her own immaculate conception. Needless to say, early Jewish opponents of Christianity saw things very differently. One 2nd century tradition cast Mary as a hairdresser who had an affair with a Roman soldier by the name of Panth. Another imagined her as a prostitute, while a medieval legend suggested that she had been raped. What all these traditions have in common is their stress on Jesus' illegitimacy. This raises an intriguing question. Are these stories counterclaims to Christian traditions, or do they preserve an even older tradition in which Jesus was illegitimate, a tradition which was taken up and transformed by the Gospel writers into the story of the virginal conception? We will never know the precise details surrounding Jesus' nativity, yet our best historical guess is that Mary gave birth to him in a perfectly ordinary way in the family home in Nazareth. Significant strands of the New Testament, Paul's letters for example, and the Gospels of Mark and John know nothing of either the virginal conception, any need for a room at an inn, or any trip to Bethlehem. In this case, Mary would have had little idea of her son's destiny and little idea that she would come to be venerated by millions of people. Regardless of what you believe, Mary certainly grew to have an incredibly important role within Christianity, and therefore, within the lives of countless individuals throughout history. Just how has this place within Christianity evolved over time? One of the earliest developments in the veneration of Mary was the concept of her as the new Eve. This idea, which originated in the 2nd century, posited that just as Eve had brought about the fall of humanity through her disobedience, Mary had redeemed humanity through her obedience in giving birth to Jesus. This belief led to the concept of Mary as a powerful intercessor who could intercede on behalf of humanity before God. In the 4th and 5th centuries, the cult of the Virgin Mary began to take shape. Theological treatises were written, hymns were composed, and the first churches dedicated to Mary were built. These early devotions to Mary were heavily influenced by the Greek and Roman goddesses such as Artemis and Cybele, and the worship of these goddesses was often blended with the veneration of Mary, as Christianity and paganism were more fluid constructs at this time. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory I established the image of Mary as a blessed and perpetual virgin, an image that the Church would not waver from for the next 1,000+ years. He had interpreted the Bible in a manner that would color how Christianity expanded throughout Europe, and thus alter the perceived role of women from the 6th century onwards. Pope Gregory's reading of the role of Mary would be repeated by monks and priests. They would weave it into the Gospels as if they were gospel themselves, soon forgetting that it was a relatively recent creation. In this way, the words of Gregory soon became a reality. Mary became a pure and perfect form of womanhood, an expectation of perfection within the female form. At the same time, alongside was a reminder of another Mary, Mary Magdalene, the harlot, the temptress, forgiven by man and made whole again by the power of man. While women had held prominent roles within the church in the early centuries of Christianity, this conception firmly relegated them to lesser status. In this way, Pope Gregory charted a course of male domination for the church and society that has lasted in some form to this very day in Western society. In the Middle Ages, the cult of the Virgin Mary continued to grow and evolve. The veneration of Mary became a central aspect of popular piety, and many miracles and legends were attributed to her. This period saw the development of the concept of Mary as the mediatrix, who mediates between God and humanity. This idea was further developed by the Franciscans and the Dominicans and was fully embraced by the Church in the 13th century. Marian devotion during the plague flourished. The typical argument for this increase in devotion to the Virgin Mary has tended to be psychological. Faced with the wrath of God caused by plague, Christians turned to the Mother of God as a benefactor to relieve them from such sufferings. During the Renaissance, the image of the Virgin Mary underwent a significant transformation. In the art of the period, Mary was often depicted as a serene and contemplative figure, rather than the powerful intercessor of the Middle Ages. Michelangelo's Pietà is a striking example of this. This new image of Mary was heavily influenced by the humanism of the period, which emphasized the humanity of Jesus and his mother. The statue depicts Mary in grief, gazing down at the body of her dead son in her lap, a feeling any parent who has lost children, which was certainly common at this time, could readily associate with. The Baroque period, which followed the Renaissance, saw a resurgence of the cult of the Virgin Mary. The Baroque era was marked by a renewed emphasis on the emotional and mystical aspects of Christianity, and this was reflected in the art and literature of the period. Mary once again took on a more spiritual role. The Assumption of the Virgin Mary by Rubens is a fine example of her portrayal during this period. In this painting, Mary ascends with an aureole of winged infants in her passage to the spiritual world. Above her are two angels holding a floral wreath aloft, symbolizing her forthcoming coronation as Queen of Heaven. However, while acknowledged as the mother of Jesus, the veneration of Mary did not fully translate to Reformation churches. Martin Luther, the founder of the Lutheran Church, rejected the Catholic doctrine of the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of Mary, which held that Mary was conceived without original sin and was taken bodily into heaven at the end of her life. He also rejected the idea of Mary as a powerful intercessor and instead emphasized her role as a humble servant of God. John Calvin, the founder of the Calvinist tradition, also rejected many of the traditional Catholic teachings about Mary. He believed that Mary was a handmaid of the Lord, but rejected the idea of her as a mediator between God and humanity. He also rejected the Catholic practice of praying to Mary, instead emphasizing the importance of direct communication with God through Jesus Christ. Despite these rejections of traditional Catholic teachings, the role of the Virgin Mary was not completely removed from the churches of the Reformation. Many Protestant denominations continue to venerate Mary and include her in their liturgies and hymns. For example, the Book of Common Prayer, the liturgical text of the Anglican Church, includes a prayer to Mary, and many Anglican churches still have statues or images of Mary. In the modern era, the image and role of Mary has continued to evolve. The 19th and 20th centuries saw a renewed emphasis on the biblical Mary and her role in the life of Jesus. The Second Vatican Council, held in the 1960s, called for a greater focus on her role within the Church. For example, the Council emphasized the importance of the Virgin Mary as a model of faith and a symbol of the Church's mission to bring salvation to all people. For many modern women, the Mary of Christian tradition is at best an irrelevance, at worst, one more reminder of the way in which no woman can live up to the image of perfection, that of the perpetual virgin and perfect mother, created by centuries of male theologians. What can speak to us, though, is her humanity. Mary shares many women's experiences: her early arranged marriage, her struggle to keep the family together after the death of her husband, her love for her son, and her grief at his death. It is the human Mary who reaches across the centuries to women in every age and every culture. The Virgin Mary is still venerated by millions of people around the world, and her role in Christianity continues to evolve. In the 21st century, the Virgin Mary has been celebrated as a model of faith and a symbol of hope, particularly for the marginalized and oppressed. Today, the Virgin Mary remains a powerful and enduring symbol of the Christian faith, and her image and role continue to inspire devotion and reflection for generations to come. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.